In 2021, while visiting family, I partook in some devil's lettuce and ate too much too fast. Normally, when you eat too quickly, you'll come down with a case of hiccups. That was not so for me. As the vibration shook in my veins, I started to enter a dream I've had since I was a preteen. I am stuck in a loop. It starts with darkness. Then comes a silo of words, and I only catch snippets of them. I know they're from my life, names of people I know. I'm trying to grasp them to remember where I was and who I was. Who were these people to whom these names belonged? I open my eyes, and I'm sat with my family. My breath catches, my every cell is racing. I start to remember the loop. I know the bottle of water is coming before it does. I live 2 seconds ahead of reality, but I can't get my body to respond correctly to that. I need help. All of those words start bleeding together. All I know is that this has happened before. I look my family in the eyes and I say, this is all that's happened. There's never been anything different. My entire life was a dream made up to distract me from the torture of my never-ending loop. Can't remember anything. I'm stuck. The repeating sounds in my head were there before the dream. I imagined the people and systems and stories they belonged to in order to give meaning to those sounds, meanings that did not exist, that were not real. I scream in the bathroom because when my family comes to help me calm down, they are not human. Their faces are wrong. My face is wrong in the mirror. I don't know him. I don't know them. They laugh. This is all that has ever happened. I am a sinner. I imagined these people were my family, but they weren't even human. They were demons torturing me forever. There was no escape. There would never be any escape. I swallowed a spoonful of hot sauce and lay down to sleep. I knew I would dream once more of a life that never happened, and eventually it would fade into darkness, and I would wake once more into my torture. I had to stop smoking after that. A year or so later, someone bought me THC gummies for Christmas. I took one. It had a larger dose than any of us realized. I hadn't checked beforehand anyway, and I was back in the loop. I vomited all over the tub, and I panicked until I once again drifted off to sleep. Ever since then, when I experience a moment of deja vu, I freeze. My breath quickens. This is part of the loop. It is all that has ever happened. It's all that will ever happen. No matter what it is, I remember it as part of the dream of the torture. For a moment, I panic in a way nothing else makes me panic. A few seconds pass, maybe a couple of minutes, and then I calm down. Silly Bear, I think. Loops are just a trick, and tricks are for kids. The last time this happened was a couple of weeks ago while I was typing away on my laptop. It's easier to come out of the fear now. My loop is one of torture and death. It has a terrifying existentialist question at its core. So of course I want to use it as a jumping off point to talk about two of my favorite pieces of art, the musical Hadestown by Anais Mitchell and the video game Hades by Supergiant Games. These loops that they involve are important. They teach us a lot. They help me remain sane-ish. Let's talk about them. Loop 1. Synopses. Let's start with everyone's favorite part of the good old video essay genre. The brief overview meant to allow people who don't really know what's being discussed but are vaguely interested in watching this anyway to have more of a clue of what's going on. Don't worry, this whole video is not a summary, passing as a video essay. If you hate that idea, and or do not need said summaries, jump ahead to the next bit. For those who decided to lay a boot instead, let's get on with it. Hadestown is a musical by Anais Mitchell which serves as a retelling of the Greek myth concerning Orpheus, the ancient singer-songwriter, and his beloved Eurydice, apparently. In the original, Eurydice is a nymph, but in the musical, she's just another person. Hadestown takes place in a world out of whack. The winters are cold, harsh, and long. They cover the place in white, like the best sorts of tops. The summers are dreadfully hot, like the best sorts of verses. Springs are short like me. No one gives a shit about fall. Because of all of this, there are little pockets of humanity. It is hard to eat, it's hard to survive, it's hard to trust anyone, when most people have resorted to some degree of trickery and betrayal just to stay alive. Orpheus falls in love at first sight. He wins Eurydice over with his unending optimism and the magic of his song, which might be able to fix the world and put the seasons back in working order. As he works on his song, Eurydice goes looking for food. A harsh storm is coming. It's cold. She runs into Hades, lord of the underworld, here reimagined as an industrial factory city. Hades offers the starving cold Eurydice a place and a job in the warm protection of Hadestown. She chooses to survive. Can you blame her? Orpheus goes after his beloved. He breaks into Hadestown, something no one has ever done before. Eurydice, forced to labor for Hades until the end of time, retrieves a bit of her humanity upon the reunion. Hades has Orpheus beat up. Orpheus begins a workers' rebellion, and through reminding Hades and Persephone of their love for each other, earns the chance to walk out of Hadestown with Eurydice. Only, he mustn't look back. If he does, he leaves, she returns. The workers cheer him on. After all, if he can do it, so can they. As in the original myth, he looks back at the last second. He fails. The company laments that this, as we were told at the very start, is a tragedy. It is a sad song. And yet they're going to sing it again in the hopes that it might turn out differently this time, next time. They applaud the Orpheuses of the world. The brand strikes up again. We sing once more. The game Hades follows Zagreus, son of Hades and prince of the underworld. Zagreus and his father don't particularly get along, and he aims to leave the underworld in order to find his mother. Olympus believes he is off to join the rest of his family up on their mountain, so they support his escape attempts because of this. He battles his way up the mazes of Hades toward the surface. Every time he dies, he returns to his father's throne room and decides to try again. When he finally wins against Hades, he wanders the surface of Earth until he discovers a shack with his mother. But, alas, Zagreus is of the underworld. He cannot survive outside of it for very long, and so he will always die and return to his home. He continues to fight his way up. He wants to know his mother. He wants to see her more. He wants to mend things with his family. Eventually, Persephone returns to the underworld. She reunites with Hades. She and Zagreus hatch a plot to bring the rest of Olympus there for a feast, in which they will patch things up between Olympus and Hades. There will be no war. Everything will be okay. They manage to succeed. Hades employs Zagreus to continue his escape attempts so that Hades might find all the security flaws and fix them. Between his fights out of hell and sometimes on breathers in the midst of them, Zagreus gets to chat to the various gods and spirits around him. He strikes up many friendships, he fixes many wrongs, he lets people out of their loops, and yet many return to them to some degree, freely chosen. He finds love if the player so wills it. I like to lie with Thanatos, the Greek psychopomp, because, I like it when things are gay. There is no the end to Hades, though the credits do play out when you return with your mother to the underworld. There's not much story after everyone is reconciled. You've unlocked all the unlockables and you've maxed everyone's affection. But, it's fun, so you still might play. Or perhaps you start a new game. The game itself is a loop that never ends. Loop 2. Cycles. Let's talk about the circles in these artworks. The story of Persephone in Hades is integral to both the musical and the game. In Hadestown, it seems Persephone herself is the cause of the seasons. When she is gone, it is winter. When she is there, summer arrives. The coming and going would probably be spring and fall. You could read the lyrics of Epic 1 to be that perhaps Helios has some sort of crush on Persephone, and that's why the sun grows hotter when she's there, but still, she's directly connected to flowers, spring, life. Persephone is a goddess of rebirth, a harvest goddess. In Hades, however, it isn't Persephone herself that's responsible for the seasons. Rather, it's the grief and wrath of her mother Demeter that brings about winter. The seasons are cyclical. Those who do not like the winter suffer through it for the promise of spring. Those who melt in the hot summer sun long for the cool breezes of fall and the gentle snows of winter. Weather repeats. It becomes climate. We name the rainy season so we can look forward to the ends of droughts, or for the coming breaks of sunlight through all the gloomy clouds. Both artworks, in part, are about the troubles between Persephone and Hades, how the stumbles in their love affect the seasons, their reunification, and their promise to try again. Have you ever had an ex, whether a lover or a friend, to whom you keep returning? It's painful, and then it's beautiful. It hurts, and it heals. That's not relegated to an intertwined ex, though, is it? All love is a cycle of some pain and hopefully more pleasure. As Phineas sings, love is pain. Yet it's one of the only purposes of life. Speaking of life, why don't you come over and Hakuna Matanas? Oh. We're probably all familiar with the circle of life. Plants feed the herbivores, who feed predators, who die and return to the soil to nourish the plants, and so on and so forth, etc., etc. Life is a cycle of consumption. If life as a concept is to be thought of as an animal, it has to be an Ouroboros, the snake that consumes itself forever. Persephone is not the only one who represents this cycle. Orpheus himself is a semi-divine figure of pseudo-rebirth. He descends into hell and returns. He may fail to save Eurydice, and he himself may not have died, but symbolically, he is a man who completes a circular path between the realms of life and death. Orpheus is the main character of Hadestown, and he's an NPC in Hades, often providing music and spinning exaggerated tales of Zagreus' greatness. Zagreus and Orpheus are heavily connected. In some versions of Orphic myth, Dionysus was murdered by the Titans as a toddler or a baby. However, he was resurrected in the form of Dionysus Zagreus. In other myths, like in the game, Zagreus is a different entity altogether, the child of Hades and Persephone. Dionysus is known for wine, creativity, and the lowering of inhibition. Wine comes from the harvest. He is, in a way, an agricultural harvest god, much like Persephone. Those deities who represent life must die and then return, because life itself dies and then returns. An Ouroboros is a creature of infinity. You might look at the snake and suggest it simply stop eating itself, but it has no choice. There is no telling how much of it was already consumed. Regurgitation might well fill the entirety of the universe. It perpetuates because it must. In Hadestown, the residents of the titular industrial zone work continuously. We can assume there are many sorts of laborers based on the creation of neon signs, automobiles, and more, but we are mostly presented with those who work on building the wall. They build the wall to keep out the enemy, who desires to invade, to steal the wealth and security they have, because they have jobs building a wall they must build, so they might build the wall. It's circular, it's a trap. The circle of life and death is a trap. Orpheus and Zagreus represent rebellions against structures seen as impossible to break, and in a way, they break them. Orpheus returns to the railway station. Zagreus breaks out of Hades, and yet the circle still grabs them. They trap themselves in new loops based around life and death. Orpheus, obsessed in his failure, replays the song over and over like a record you can't take off because it hurts so good. Zagreus continues his escapes and deaths. Zagreus always dies. In Greek myth, it's not as though Orpheus' ability to walk out of Hades himself saves him either. He eventually gets killed. He dies. You cannot escape the wheel. Both pieces of art are concerned with those who try to break it anyway, who imagine a world outside of the loop. They dare to dream these dangerous dreams that scare those who supposedly know better. If Orpheus manages to take Eurydice out of hell, Hadestown will empty out. If Zagreus proves one can leave and survive, Hades will empty. The veil between worlds will tear, and that's how you get a dragon age. As cool as dragons are, I don't think any of us really wants to deal with Teventer or Flemeth. Did we doom ourselves when we invented the wheel? When you hear loop, the idea of symmetry pops up, doesn't it? But that's not the case in either of these artworks. Theatrical productions carry a level of sameness, yet each individual performance is individual. Tunage on specific notes varies slightly, pauses for audience laughter to die out change based on the audience. The changes are often slight, but sometimes mishaps occur and you have to improvise your way out of them. A vocal flub might become a new one-time only run. With long-running shows, as with Hadestown on Broadway, cast members get replaced. Sometimes understudies perform. Timbres change, performance quirks change. There is a sameness, but it is not exact. Hades, as a roguelike, carries a lot of sameness. You go through the same environment types, you fight the same enemies, you live and you die and you do it again. but it's less exact even than theater is. There are so many variables for each specific run-through. Maybe this attempt you run into Thanatos and have your killing competition with him. Maybe the next one you don't see him at all. The sameness is more broad. We see this in Groundhog Day-esque art as well. Time loops, but that doesn't mean the experience is a perfect same. Many of the individual elements match, but that doesn't make the individual whole a perfect copy. Loops have moments of difference, and it's the variation that gives us the hope we can destroy the wheel. Maybe this escape will be the one Zagreus manages to stay on the surface. Maybe this replay of the song is the time Orpheus manages to rescue Eurydice. When I am cast into my torturous loop of this is all that's ever happened, the variations of my life before the torture start to slip away. The awful bits are the same, and they make everything else melt away. When I am trapped in a loop, I cannot hope to break the wheel because I become aware that there is nothing besides the wheel. What do you do when you know the loop will never end? What do you do when there is not enough variation to give you hope? Loop 3. Sisyphus. In the game Hades, during the first world level, you occasionally run into the resting, hulking figure of the shade Sisyphus. He rests between staircases, chained to his best friend and eternal torturer, Boldy. It's one of those illusory staircases where the top becomes the bottom and there is no particular end, which sounds like a good relationship. When he rests, normally he's tortured by the Furies, the boss characters for the first world, one of whom you may become romantically involved with if you like being straight or something. This is a really interesting variation of the Sisyphus myth. Normally Sisyphus must roll his boulder up the hill, and as we all know, before he can reach the top, it rolls down. He must descend and begin to roll again. He will do this for eternity. It is impossible to reach the top. With the staircases, this becomes quite literal in that there is no physical top to even aspire to. The stairs are designed to be never-ending. There is no hope for Sisyphus. Even though he befriends Zagreus and Zagreus manages to loosen the terms of his imprisonment, he will still push Boldy up the stairs for all eternity. He is in a loop that will never end. Yet in the game, Sisyphus is happy. Like the creation of the wall in Hadestown, Sisyphus' action doesn't serve a real purpose either. I mean, there is a sort of purpose. He is being punished. The wall is created to break the workers of Hadestown and keep them from rising up. Yet there isn't a need for the wall, nor is there a need for a perpetual boulder motion machine. These actions on some level are meaningless. They are quite absurd. I'm going to plagiarize myself here from my essay on the good place. Oh, forgive me, Father, for I have sinned, and I need you to punish me, Daddy. In the original myth, the moment he walks down the hill and escapes the physical torment, he has the free will to choose how he thinks about the action, about life, about meaning. If he chooses not to despair, then he continues to defy the gods, and we must imagine Sisyphus happy. Absurdism is an offshoot of existentialism. You probably know what an existential crisis is. What if this is all a dream? What if the Matrix is real? What if this is all the imagination of a weird little YouTuber who sometimes believes he's trapped in a loop of eternal torture? Existentialism, absurdism, and nihilism all start with experiencing an existential crisis and confronting the nature of our mortality. We are going to die. We live in an absurd universe that is one that does not care about us. It is cold and likely meaningless. An existential crisis forces you to glimpse the sea of nihilism. You stand on the shores of a black hole. Do you dive in and embrace annihilation? Do you find meaning in the personal, the self? Do you believe you can create meaning? Or do you find meaning in the defiant search for meaning despite the absurdity of the universe? Sisyphus finds meaning and therefore happiness in his defiance of the gods and not letting them break him. They mean for him to despair, to embrace nihilism, but he does not. We must imagine Sisyphus happy, and the makers of Hades certainly do. Rather than a moment where he gets to walk down the hill to get back to the boulder to push it up the hill, he has this landing where he's meant to turn to continue his ascent. Do-do-do, shoop, do-do-do. Until Zagreus' intervention, he occasionally gets tortured on this step. It is here where he gets his brief moment of rest, where he may be happy. We imagine it's here where he carved the smiley face on his boulder in defiance of the gods. Do you know why Sisyphus is trapped in this eternal loop? He's not He not only revealed a secret of Zeus, which is a big no-no, but when Zeus sent Thanatos after him, Sisyphus trapped the god of death by chaining him in Tartarus. Sisyphus himself is a man who cheated death. He broke the cycle, and when he broke it, no one could die. Those who suffered had their suffering prolonged. Those who warred lived bloody and destroyed on the battlefield. The broken wheel did not lead to paradise. He was forced to repair it, and eventually he found himself subjected to the same cycle. He who lived and cheated death would go on to die. His torture after that would be the very thing he fought against, the almighty loop. Sisyphean tasks are those which are unending, meaningless, futile, harrowing. The characters of Hadestown are revealed to be actors who were singing this song on an unending loop, repeating the story into eternity. When I read the annoying work of Tolstoy on What is Art, he felt annoyed by an opera, if I remember correctly. It might have been a ballet, because a lot of work and toil and suffering went into creating an ephemeral, non-material thing, an experience, a moment, a painting in time that dies in the moment of its birth. Now, I found that book not really that great of an argument or a read, but it's interesting to think about in this context. In a way, as Hadestown itself shows, labor is a sort of cyclical Sisyphean task. When you complete a task, a new one awaits you. You wake up, you work, you go home, you push the boulder up, you chase it back down, you do the laundry, you do the dishes, you pay your taxes. These things are never ending. They don't feel particularly great. But theater itself, one could argue, though I wouldn't really, is a more Sisyphean sort of labor, especially when it performs tragedies. We know the ending will not change. We know this effort will not make the next time turn out right, but we perform it anyway. We sing it anyway. If I'm trapped in a loop where I imagine this life in moments between my otherworldly tortures by demons who sap away my knowledge of this life, what is the point? Why do I continue? Well, like with most Sisyphean tasks, I don't have a choice. It will happen regardless of my will. The point of Sisyphus is that we can still find enjoyment, happiness, and meaning despite our lack of control when we get those moments to choose our thoughts. Right? Is it possible to be happy? Loop 4, tragedy. The game Hades is not itself a tragedy. It may have tragic elements, but it is ultimately a happy story that ends, so much as it can be said to have an end, on a happy note. Hadestown is a tragedy. In her video essay on Titanic, the author Lindsay Ellis talks about how she continues to rewatch the film, and despite knowing how it ends, she still hopes that this time they manage it. They manage to avoid the iceberg. Jack and Rose, those snappy kids, their love might make it this time. Of course, she knows they won't, but she engages with the tragedy anyway, and she adores the momentary belief that the impossible might happen. My favorite film of all time is I'm Thinking of Ending Things. It's not a happy film. There's an addictive quality to pain, isn't there? And I don't mean that in a literal diagnosable way. Saying things that aren't diagnosable addictions are literal addictions would be irresponsible, and I'm not Dr. Andrew Huberman, so I'm not going to do that. Pain isn't literally addictive, but there is something satisfying about it, isn't there? Professor Julie Exline says this in regards to real-life tragedy. When people reflect on these scary situations, they might envision themselves facing the same fate, a disturbing possibility, but also one that will make them feel relieved to be sitting safely at home. They might also compare themselves with the people who have suffered the tragedy and feel grateful that they aren't facing the same problems. Let's take Hadestown. If you zoom out from the specific details, the tragedy is thus. You have the opportunity to save a loved one, and you almost do. But you make a mistake and they're gone forever. We can imagine this quite easily. You know, say a friend is overdosing and you rush them to the emergency room. For whatever reason, you get there a bit late. You later realize or imagine the ambulance, though expensive, would have been faster and safer. Perhaps they would have lived. There are an infinite amount of constructions where we can imagine almost saving someone, failing, and finding some fault of our own to blame the separation on. That is a painful common anxiety. Hadestown allows you to experience that pain and alleviate it. The anxiety lessens for a time. We are safe. We are not experiencing the tragedy as our own world when it happens. We are not Orpheus. We can be grateful that we are not. Yet we see ourselves in him, our best selves, our hopes and naiveties, our Dionysian joys, our aspirations toward bravery and love. When we see this embodiment of these characteristics hurt, we recall the deaths of our own innocence. We recall the pains of life and how they can make us jaded. When the company tells us they will sing again, we are called to once more recall that version of ourselves. We are resurrected. It is death and tragedy that resurrects us. Now, if we're talking tragedy in general, and why we loop through tragic stories over and over, catharsis, safety, and positive pain can't be the only explanations. There is also schadenfreude, the joy of another's suffering. Tragedy can bring joy. It can sate sadistic urges. I didn't particularly like the film Triangle of Sadness, but for those who did, from the reviews I read, they quite enjoyed the overlong vomit scene because they saw it as justice. They enjoyed the suffering felt by those they felt deserved it. Pain can be very seductive. Aren't all sexual relationships, even vanilla ones, BDSM? Think about true crime for a second. I've recently been putting on documentaries while I'm working, and I mostly manage to tune them out because I don't find them all that interesting. But it has put true crime on the mind. Why are people obsessed with true crime? On some level, we can point to mystery stories. People love a whodunit. People love to see stories of justice triumphing, and that is a good amount of the genre, yes, but I don't think it's possible to pinpoint all the fervor for it on that. When SNL poked fun at the true crime obsessed, it wasn't about their interest in crimes or personal beliefs that they themselves are proper sleuths like you might see in Only Murders in the Building. Rather, they poke fun at the comfort people seem to find in the horrible, disturbing, scary crimes of the world, of the fantasy of being the victim, the tragedy that underlies all true crime. Speaking about true crime, Professor Patricia Bryan said, "There's something about facing danger when it's not real, it's not personal. People like to be scared or like to see the dark recesses of someone's mind. Some people would say it helps us prepare for the violence in our own lives." It seems similar to how we continuously replay trauma or other past hurts in our mind. We go over how the arguments might have gone differently. We stab ourselves on the thorns of our past repeatedly, almost as if stuck in a spiraling loop. Though it hurts, we've got a degree of control. We imagine ourselves facing it now, what we might change, and sometimes we are able to take our minds off of it, change tracks. We like tragedy because it hurts at the same time it brings pleasure. It's bottoming for the first time, but in a way you can relive. If you watch a tragic film whose ending you already know, you can let yourself do two things. First, like Ellis, you can choose to hope despite it all. You engage in absurdist meaning making. Second, you can find new pains in all the happy moments because you know of the coming tragedy. Titanic works because it is a love story you know can only end in pain. It has the beats of a romance, but you know it isn't one. It won't have a happy ending. It's literary fiction. It's tragedy. And that hurts so good. In contrast, Hades the game is not a tragedy. The failures of Zagreus help his next attempt at success. Does it connect then to tragedy? Well, in a way. See, the narrative of Hades and the gameplay itself are built around eternal failure. Zagreus finally fights his way to the surface, only to discover that he can't survive for long outside of Hades. That is tragedy. Zagreus finds his birth mother and bonds with her, only for her to, at one point, tell him to leave her alone, to not come back. That is tragedy. You know, no matter how many times you succeed, Zagreus will still die. The loop will continue. It is built like an unending tragedy, where the specks of hope, the steps up the hill, will only lead to the next despair, the next fall of the boulder. It is only through continuous looping tragedy that we get to a happy non-ending ending. Loop 5. Education. Perhaps we invented the wheel because we operate in cycles. We learn through repetition. When you're in grade school working on your spelling words, there's not much you can do besides spell them over and over again until you remember how they go. Through repeating this process, you get a handle on the patterns of words, and it gets a bit easier to spell things with fewer viewings of them. Homework is a repetition of what you learned in your lessons. You learn about the same events in history as you go through school, but in each loop, each new lesson on it, you learn a little bit more. Complexity is introduced. The loops rhyme, but they aren't the exact same. When you're analyzing art, you tend to notice new things on each watch, read, or listen. It teaches you a little bit more about the piece, about the world, about the artist, about yourself, or it completely changes how you view it. Still, you go back. You consume it, and it consumes you, on and on forever. Nostalgia is a trap, sure, but it captures a real thing. The comfort and safety of knowing the ending, even when the ending hurts. Does Lindsay Ellis continually watch Titanic in part due to nostalgia? Sure, but as we noted, it's more than that. Cyclical tragedies, Sisyphean narratives, we might call them, where we hope, have it dashed, and then hope again anyway despite it all, are the stories of life. When we're born, we experience a fundamental lack for the first time. We become conscious. We find ourselves lacking something, some thing, and we find things we believe or decide will fill that lack. If we ever obtain it, we find that it doesn't. All this time working for it, just to fail when we succeed. That is tragedy. It's Sisyphean. These stories teach us how to do it again, how to find hope and meaning in chasing what we know to be true. Life will go on regardless. We will not find the thing that destroys everything and brings about pure peace. I sometimes find myself trapped in an impossible, torturous loop. It consumes me. I land in a panic. I start to lose my grip on reality, but then it comes back. Like Orpheus and Zagreus, I return to life. I like art with death loops because they help me come to terms with my own. Howdy, and thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, share if you're feeling saucy. You can join me over on Patreon if you would like, wherein you'll get these videos and others early. You'll also get to have some fun behind the scenes access to some of my art projects, some more personal vlogging style content, and you'll just get to support me and we'll get to chat about art a whole bunch, which is what I love to do most. You can go over to Amazon Smashwords or wherever you get your ebooks and purchase a copy of my poetry collections, Butterfly Snuff, and A Museum of Art and Eggs, both of which are also available in paperback and hardback. I have a second channel where I'm just reading through a bunch of public domain stuff for the fun of it and through my own work, so you'll get readings of these poetry collections and some short stories and some longer form fiction when I get around to it, and some plays. And I have a third channel where I'm uploading my music and art instead of having it all clog up this channel. So go support those if you feel like it. That content, a lot of it will also be getting uploaded early to Patreon. So if you want all of my stuff in one convenient space, Patreon is the place to go, which would be really cool of you, you know? I hope you have a fantastic day. Do not be rude in the comments. Do not go and harass anybody. And I will see you next time.